Hello, this is Dr. Amy Piontek, and I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time to review with you the health belief model. This is one of the earliest models particularly used in health education and public health. It was developed initially in the 1950s by social psychologists in the United States, again, specifically in the public health service, to explain the widespread failure of people to participate in programs to prevent and detect disease. Later, the model was extended to study people's responses to symptoms and their behaviors in response to a diagnosed illness, particularly adherence to medical regimens. Although the model evolved gradually and in response to very practical public health concerns, its basis in psychological theory is reviewed in order to help you understand its rationale for selected concepts and the relationships, as well as its strengths and weaknesses. So if you notice here, we have our modifying factors. These are not to be confused with modifiable factors, but these are factors that really come into play when we start thinking about disease and disease prevention. So the modifying factors of age, gender, ethnicity, personality, socioeconomics, and knowledge all really come together and define individual behaviors. So this health belief model that you see, you're going to see many different kinds of layouts of the model. This one in particular, I took from the 2008 text, Health Behavior and Health Education Theory, Research and Practice, written by Glanz, Reimer, and Viswanathan, because I really liked how simple, clear, and concise this diagram was. So when you look at the modifying factors and then you look at the individual beliefs, we have perceived susceptibility to and severity of disease, which also directly ties in with perceived threat, individual beliefs of perceived benefits, perceived barriers, and then finally perceived self-efficacy. So when the model was first developed, perceived self-efficacy was actually not included. It wasn't until a little bit later on that it was about 1988 when perceived self-efficacy was added to the health belief model. So when we think about perceived susceptibility to and severity of disease, susceptibility refers to beliefs about the likelihood of getting a disease or condition. For example, a woman must believe that she has the possibility of getting breast cancer before she will even be interested in obtaining a mammogram, for example. If she doesn't believe that she's susceptible, she may not see the relevance in doing any kind of preventive care or looking at the obtaining a mammogram, for example, or getting a mammogram. Perceived severity really deals with the feelings about the seriousness of contracting an illness, or if they have the illness, leaving it untreated. These include evaluations of both medical and clinical consequences, for example, death, disability, and pain, and possible social consequences such as effects of the conditions on work, family life, or social relations. The combination, again, of the susceptibility and severity really does lead then to the perceived threat. So when we talk about perceived benefits, even if a person perceives personal susceptibility to a serious health condition or perceived threat, whether this perception leads to behavior change will be influenced by the person's beliefs regarding perceived benefits of the various available actions for reducing the disease threat. Other non-health related perceptions, such as the financial savings related to quitting smoking or pleasing a family member by having a mammogram may also influence behavioral decisions. Therefore, individuals exhibiting optimal beliefs in susceptibility and severity are not expected to accept any recommended health action unless they also perceive the action as potentially beneficial by reducing this threat. So when we look at perceived barriers then, the potential negative aspects of a particular health action, these are the perceived barriers, may act as impediments to undertaking recommended behaviors. A kind of non-conscious cost-benefit analysis occurs where an individual's weigh the action's expected benefits with perceived barriers. So for example, someone might say, it could help me, but it could be expensive, have negative side effects, be unpleasant, inconvenient, or time-consuming. Therefore, combined levels of susceptibility and severity provide the energy or force to act, and the perception of benefits minus the barriers provide a preferred path or action. So then when we talk about the perceived self-efficacy, this really comes into play as to how confident is the person in making a behavior change. Will they have the skills and the knowledge necessary to make the change happen? For example, let's talk about smoking cessation and a smoker's self-efficacy in changing their behavior to stop smoking. So they see the susceptibility and the severity of potentially the disease processes that can happen with smoking. They know the benefits of stopping to stop smoking. It reduces their likelihood. It might be a cost savings for them. Some barriers might be, well, everybody else smokes around them, and it would be really hard to go against their peers. Maybe if they have a smoking circle at work, and they're no longer part of that smoke break, that could be a barrier because they lose that socialization. So their self-efficacy is how strong can they be in facing these barriers, for example. What if they have a craving for the nicotine? Would they have the resources to overcome those cravings? Like, do they have, for example, the medication or the nicotine gum, for example, that they can fight off those cravings? Do they have the willpower to continue on with their smoking cessation program? Once they've stopped smoking, do they have the self-efficacy to never going back to becoming a smoker again? So that's pretty much what the self-efficacy component in the individual belief of the health belief model really represents. So then when you take in consideration all of the individual beliefs, we go into the individual behaviors. Now, this is whether or not they're going to change their behavior. One component that is very influential is the cues to action. And again, some health belief models do include the cues to action. Others may not. They might call it something else. But what it is necessarily is, or what it is specifically, is that impetus or that push for individuals to change their behavior. So this might be, perhaps if we use the example of a smoker, this could be a persistent cough that they have, and then they watch the COPD commercials and they start getting scared, like, oh, that could be me if I don't stop smoking. That's a cue to action. Perhaps they go to their physician for an annual checkup, and the physician says, you know, you really should stop smoking. You there are benefits to stop smoking. You are at risk for developing XYZ or cancer. So that also is a cue to action. So cues to action can certainly be a predictor to whether or not an individual is going to change their behavior. It really depends upon the value that the individual places on that cue. So for behavior change to succeed, people must feel threatened by their current behavioral patterns. Again, that perceived susceptibility and severity. Excuse me, and believe that change of a specific kind will result in a valued outcome at an acceptable cost, which is the perceived benefit. And they also must feel themselves confident, self-efficacious, to overcome perceived barriers to take action. So all of these really do work hand in hand. And as we go on to looking at Nola Pender's model in the next video, a lot of these components exist, but the problems that arise with just using the health belief model specifically is that it really does not take into consideration the utility of the predictions and interventions. So Nola Pender had created a revised health promotion model, and we will discuss that in the next video.